Welcome to another episode of Ignite&Scale, where we dive deep into the stories of those who are making a significant impact in the world of startups, technology, and innovative business models. In today's episode, we're thrilled to have Quentin Le Hetet with us. Quentin is the UK Country Director at GiPA, an organisation renowned for its in-depth market research and intelligence in the automotive sector. Further insights into their latest analysis is available in the show notes. Quentin, before we delve into some of the details of your survey and what it means for the future of transportation, perhaps you could share a bit with us about your journey and what's led you to your current role at GiPA, please.
Hello, Mike. Yes, thank you very much for having me today. So yes, I started working my career, my work life with KPMG in the consulting area. I used to work there for like 2-3 years, and then I moved onto GiPA. I first looked at what we used to call we still call the growth market, so South Africa, Turkey, Northern Africa, and Ukraine back then. That was until 2017, and since then I'm in charge of GiPA in the UK. So in a nutshell, that's more or less about me. It's been about 10 years that I am fully inside the automotive, and more especially the automotive aftermarket.
Followed your work for most of that time as well, and I've always found it really insightful. But perhaps you could dive into some of the rich insights that's in your latest report and what it means in terms of the purchasing journey, purchasing mode, service plans, etc., and what you see at the moment are the kind of key drivers, particularly in the EV sector, and what it means for after sales.
Yes, so it's important to mention that our report focuses on private drivers especially. Okay, so no company registered fleet drivers, but private drivers, which is of course quite an important part of the market for the EV adoption. We know at the moment that new registrations for EVs, if we look at Q1 24, are in terms of percentage slightly lower to the same time last year, but we are on a growing market, and therefore that proportion in absolute volume is still a growth, maybe not as an important growth as some was expecting, but still an important growth. That growth mainly is driven by company cars. Registration for EV is quite important, a bit less so for private drivers. So it's really important and interesting to understand better those private drivers. In terms of purchasing journey, the first important point is who are they, those drivers? They are, if you look at them as an household, if we can say that, in terms of household income, they are on the upper ends, the upper brackets of revenue. So that's the first thing that is quite important to have in mind. Those vehicles are not cheap, and therefore we can clearly see that the means and the disposable income of those private buyers, is higher than the UK average. Then also what is interesting to see is that they are already more equipped with cars. Okay, so they have on average more cars in their household than the traditional cars owner. Okay, so their EV for most of them comes as a complement of another car. Okay, not all, but some, and the majority of them. So that's the second point that is important. When you look now at their customer journey, their purchasing journey, really there are three motivations for them to move towards EV. And the proportion are relatively similar, so that's quite interesting. They are technology-driven drivers. That's the future. They want to experience that firsthand. They are a bit geek, if we can say that. They want the latest thing, and they want to understand the technology and so on. And potentially they have built around their house a system, if we can say that. They have solar panels. They want to find the best possible settings, so they are actually as efficient in energy as possible. So that's really the technology-driven ones. Then you also have the environment-driven one, which sometimes are also the technology-driven ones, but sometimes are really doing this more for the footprint than for the technology on itself. And finally, the ones that are motivated by savings, according to them, in their mind and in their process. Buying an electric car is going to be cheaper in the long run, and therefore in terms of maintenance, but also in terms of energy. In terms of fueling, if we can say that. So that's really the three different profile that we see. When they buy, and that's interesting, and generally it is the case for any kind of new car buyers within the industry, in the UK at least, they tend to go, they buy the car, they buy a service plan that comes with it, they buy the full package car, if we can say that, and in their mind, I'm doing an acquisition, I'm paying for the next 3 years of no hassles, okay? So everything should be included in the package that I'm getting from the dealer. So that's in a nutshell, the profile that we can see for those private drivers, which are going in the future to have to be growing if we want to see the EV market growing as well as the government mandate is asking vehicle manufacturer to achieve.
And how different is the UK market relative to other European markets? I mean, I know you've got comprehensive coverage really around the world, but if you compare the UK to Europe, what are the kind of key differences that you see there?
So yes, that report that we are discussing, we ran it in 7 different countries of Europe. So the five biggest markets, European markets in terms of car size, plus car park size, plus Poland, plus Portugal. So what we see that is interesting, first of all, we see a lot of common behaviors. For example, I'll give you just a few and then I'll answer your question. But what is common, for example, is the accident rate. The accident rate, oddly enough, you could think with all those technologies and so on, is going to be lower, more ADAS and more assistance to drive those vehicles. But actually, what we can see is also you have a very different technology. So you have instant torque on those vehicles, and you can accelerate quite quickly. And a lot of people are never had a car like this before. So that's one of the reasons, amongst others, where we see that actually impact, not necessarily a huge crash, but impact and accidentology, generally speaking, is higher for those vehicles. And when looking first at the result, we definitely saw that kind of conclusion across the different countries. So one very interesting one. On the other hand, what makes the UK different, first of all, is the way in the UK we consume cars, if I can say that, with financing. Okay, whether it's PCP, PCH. PCP especially is a financial product that you don't get anywhere else in Europe. It's a very mature market for financing, the UK market. So because of this, that financing has an impact on the ownership cycle of drivers in the UK, and most drivers buy a car via PCP and then get that car for the full cycle of that product. So PCP is maybe 3 years or something like this, and then the car is remarketed for someone else, if we can say that, and someone else will buy it used. That's the main difference we can see, and what the impact it has is on after sales as well, because then it means that for the next 3 years you bought your car new with kind of the full package, service plan and everything for the next 3 years. So in terms of retention for the vehicle manufacturer, that's relatively fine and simple to manage. However, then that car is remarketed, become used very young, at 3 or something years old, and will then be already at 3 years old, 3.5 years old, be driven by a used car driver. And those used car drivers, they are not behaving at all the same way than the original, the new car drivers. And that's really the main difference and the big challenge for the UK market in terms of after sales and in terms of how to manage those drivers. I was just about to say, in terms, what is important in terms of EV transition and the acquisition of the vehicle in the first place. The British drivers have been very keen to get on that EV ladder if you compare that to other markets, because I think intrinsically the British are more petrol heads than some other markets, and therefore that technology-driven behavior and testing new brands and new technology, new vehicles, new models, they are really keen on that, and that's a key one. And where was I going with this? That therefore the EV ladder has been good, but that's where I wanted to go. On the other hand, there are very limited subsidies and grants around those vehicles to motivate private drivers to get onto that ladder.
I mean, what do you think the UK needs to do to further accelerate EV adoption? I mean, we've seen in France some of the incentives there. Is that the right strategy? Is our charging infrastructure on par, better, worse than Europe? What are the kind of key factors in your mind to further accelerate EV adoption in the UK?
It's quite a difficult equation to solve that one, but I think if you look, I can only take example for France, for example, as you know that already, and I'm sure whoever is going to listen to that can hear. I'm not British but French. For France, for example, listening to the radio, what they did recently is they at the beginning of 2024, they promoted EV car for the lower end household, if we can say that, in terms of income, and the fact that it's not as affordable for them than it is for higher end or upper class. So the idea is that they say, okay, we have that amount of vehicles. I can't remember exactly how many there are. I think it was between 50 and 70,000 vehicles that they would have, electric cars that are affordable thanks to grants and so on for lower earners. Basically the interesting thing is that those cars went very quickly. So again, I can't remember the exact number, but let's say it was 50,000 vehicles. That was the quota for the whole year of 2024. Beginning of February, they say, okay, we sold them all. We see you in 2025. So what I'm saying here is that definitely subsidies and grants help, definitely. To me, there is, however, another challenge that is very important and even more important in the UK, which is the used car market. As we mentioned earlier, those cars a new car in the UK is going to come to the again on the market as used very quickly in the process, and in its lifetime compared to Spain or Italian market, for example. So the used car market, and for the used car market to find its feet, is essential in order to be able to then promote the acquisition of used car EV cars by people who potentially have never bought a new car and they don't want to, or simply cannot afford to. So that's, to me, another very, very important point. We can already see that the market seems to be slightly but surely finding its feet. I think one of the key elements would also to have some kind of battery state of health protocol, which is universal, if we can say that, a bit like the credit check that you can do when you want to buy a car, to make sure that car it doesn't have any finance left or anything like this. So that's the thing that is potentially that would help, I think, a lot of drivers who are not familiar with the EV world. If they know that the car they are buying, they can compare two cars, for example, at about the same price and range, and they can see that on one side you've got like 50% battery state of health, and on the other side 60, 65 or 70, then you have an idea of what you're buying and how to make the most of the money that you have to buy that car.
I mean, it's really interesting point you make there, Quentin, and we've seen some really interesting kind of smaller software businesses that in theory can kind of offer this. It's the kind of the age-old question with startups is it's a race and which one is the fastest, but the prize to have that technology is obviously huge, but it's how these companies can kind of get there with the larger fleets at the moment as well. But I definitely believe this will be a feature of the market very soon, because there's some really fascinating businesses, and it's really interesting how they do it with a mixture of hardware or software, and these things need to be really rigorously tested. But I think there's some great businesses that'll be able to offer that very soon. So interesting you kind of bring that up.
A little bit, I would give you a personal example. Recently, we bought, my wife wanted an upgrade on her phone, an iPhone, and we were looking at a refurbished option. And iPhone does that very well, but the problem is that it's the OEM feature, and I think that we need something that is streamlined across the industry. If you look at an iPhone, you can see the battery health in 2 or 3 clicks. You can see that straight away. I guess that's more or less what we want to see for the used car market. It just has to be a feature that is independent from the manufacturer.
Yeah, no, exactly. And lastly, how do you see the future of car maintenance and the care that evolves with the rise of EV vehicles? And what trends do you think consumers and industry stakeholders need to be prepared for?
So that part, which is where GiPA specialized, the after sales and the care and maintenance, that's one of the key areas that we wanted to investigate with that survey. What is interesting, first of all, in terms of experience and in terms of feedback from those drivers, there is a consensus that EV maintenance, in terms of frequency, in terms of cost, in terms of complexity, is simpler than the ICE vehicles. However, when you look at where they are getting their cars serviced, still, of course, those cars are very young, very, very young, okay? And therefore, they are most likely to go back to the dealer. And therefore, mathematically, if you compare the average cost of maintenance for cars that are 1-2 years old maximum going back to the dealer versus the 9 years old car park in the UK, with a mix going to the dealer and a greater proportion going outside the dealer, of course, the bill is actually more expensive. The invoice is more expensive for electric cars at the moment. Now, if we were to compare Apple with Apple and trying to redo some weighted average, we would probably be quite closer to the numbers we have. So in terms of market value at the moment, because of the youth of that park, we don't see a decrease in revenue, if we can say that. Okay, it's completely different business model, that's for sure. Much more labor, less parts. Okay, and this will definitely carry on this way as the market is increasing. We are really in a takeoff phase at the moment. So even though we will have the cars that have been sold for the last 3 years are going to age year after year, we are going to have so much injection of new cars that the greater proportion will still be in the very young bracket, 0 to 4 years. So that's one key thing. The other really important thing, and I think that's for all vehicle manufacturers, dealers to understand, is tires. Tires, we can clearly see, is a huge part of the maintenance, and quite at an earlier age than for the regular ICE vehicle. And the tire market in the UK, unfortunately, is a very cheap market. It's a very cheap market because there is a lot of part-worn tires coming from Germany or elsewhere that are flooding the market. Okay, and on top of this, more generally speaking, the value or the market price for tires is very low. The margin are very restrained, and therefore the dealers are not necessarily paying so much attention or cannot compete with the on the tire market. And they will have to in the future, because the tires is going to be one of the main reasons with service to enter a workshop. So if you are not seen by your customer base as a provider of tires, then you won't see those customers back. So that's really an important one. And to me, tire is probably the biggest challenge or opportunity for the after sales players working with and targeting electric cars.
Quentin, that's great. I mean, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights with us today. It's always great to kind of sit down and chat through your views of the market, particularly on the after sales and the evolving car park. So really appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you for having me.
If you want to listen to more episodes of the podcast, we're on all good audio platforms. Our website is also www.cambriaprivatecapital.com, and you can also find myself on LinkedIn and Twitter, where we publish our weekly blogs as well. Please do get in touch if you want more information.